On the southern edge of Chicago stood a quiet little town called Ashfield. From the outside, the town looked peaceful and beautiful. During the day, people smiled, shops stayed open, and children walked to school without fear. But when night fell, the entire town came under the control of three dangerous men: Victor Hayes, Danny Collins, and Marco Reed. They were the leaders of a ruthless local gang. Even the police rarely dared to stand against them. Because in many places, money is powerful enough to silence the truth. And in that same town lived a poor teenage boy named Ethan Carter. Ethan's father was an honest carpenter. His mother worked at a small diner. Their family was poor, but they lived with peace and dignity. Everything changed the day Victor's gang began forcefully taking over old houses in the town. Ethan's father stood against them. He said, "No man becomes powerful by stealing another person's home." But courage often comes with a terrible price. One rainy night, Ethan's father was brutally beaten in the middle of the town for everyone to see. People watched from a distance, but no one stepped forward, because everyone was afraid. 17-year-old Ethan stood there helplessly, staring at his father lying on the road, covered in blood. His mother cried uncontrollably while Ethan remained frozen in silence. That night, Victor looked directly into Ethan's eyes and said, "If you want to survive in this town, you keep your head down." There were no tears in Ethan's eyes that night. There was only fire. But fire alone was not enough to fight back. A few days later, Ethan's father died from his injuries. His mother, broken by grief and illness, passed away not long after. And so, one silent night, Ethan disappeared from Ashfield. No one knew where he went. People assumed the boy had run away in fear. Victor laughed and said, "The weak always disappear like this." 10 long years passed. Ashfield became darker than ever. The gang's cruelty grew stronger, and the people buried their hatred deep inside themselves. Nobody dared to speak. Then, one cold morning, an old bus stopped at the edge of town. A homeless old beggar stepped off the bus. He wore a dirty coat, carried a torn bag over his shoulder, and had a long grey beard. As he slowly walked through the streets, his eyes carefully observed everything around him. Nobody recognized him, but those eyes looked strangely familiar, because the beggar was Ethan Carter. He had finally returned after 10 years. But not as the helpless teenager who once fled the town. Now Ethan was one of the most skilled undercover police officers in the United States. Years of brutal training had transformed him into an elite operative, working for a special undercover unit dedicated to hunting dangerous criminals. And this mission was personal. He had come back for revenge, not with bullets, but with justice. Ethan settled near the old railway station and began begging on the streets. People ignored him. Some tossed him $1 while others insulted him openly. He silently endured every humiliation, because he knew that to truly understand the evil of a city, you had to see it from the bottom. 3 days later, Ethan witnessed Victor's men brutally attacking a small shop owner. The man's only crime was failing to pay protection money. People gathered around and watched. Nobody moved. Slowly, Ethan stood up and said, "Leave him alone." Everyone turned toward the beggar in shock. Danny burst into laughter. "A beggar showing courage? Who the hell are you?" In a calm voice, Ethan replied, "It's wrong to torture helpless people." The next second, Danny shoved him violently to the ground. Victor's men laughed loudly, but there was no fear in Ethan's eyes. Even while lying on the ground, he quietly observed everything, because hidden inside his jacket was a tiny camera recording every crime. Over the next few weeks, Ethan wandered through the alleys of Ashfield. He secretly gathered evidence, recorded crimes, and sent information to a federal task force. To the people, he was still just a homeless beggar. But slowly, a few began to realize there was something unusual about him. One night, Ethan sat outside an old church when an elderly woman approached and handed him some food. She had once been a close friend of Ethan's mother. Looking into his eyes, the woman softly said, "Your eyes remind me of someone." Ethan's voice trembled. "Who?" She smiled sadly. "A boy who once wanted to stand against injustice." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. At that moment, he realized the town wasn't completely dead yet. Some good people still remained. A few days later, Victor organized a massive party attended by politicians, businessmen, and corrupt police officers. Ethan sat outside the mansion disguised as a beggar. Suddenly, a black car arrived. A teenage girl stepped out. Victor's men grabbed her and dragged her toward the house while she cried desperately for help. The sight ignited Ethan's buried rage. Because 10 years ago, his mother had cried the same way. This time, Ethan refused to stay silent. Slowly, he rose to his feet. His voice was colder and harder than ever before. "Let the girl go." Victor laughed loudly. "You want to die, beggar?" He shoved Ethan hard onto the ground, but Ethan calmly stood back up. Then, slowly, he removed his hat. He pulled away the fake beard. The laughter vanished instantly. Victor's face turned pale. In a trembling voice, he whispered, "Ethan?" Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out a golden badge. Under the bright lights, the badge gleamed powerfully. It read, "Special Undercover Unit, Officer Ethan Carter." Panic exploded across the scene. At that exact moment, police sirens screamed through the streets. Dozens of police vehicles surrounded the entire area while federal agents stormed inside, arresting everyone involved. Victor tried to run, but Ethan stepped directly into his path. Their eyes locked. 10 years of hatred burned silently between them. Victor clenched his teeth and growled, "You think you've won?" Ethan answered calmly, "No, justice has won." Victor reached for his gun, but within seconds Ethan slammed him to the ground and handcuffed him with his own hands. The people of Ashfield watched in stunned silence. The beggar they had ignored was the man who saved them all. A few moments later, the small shop owner Ethan once defended stepped forward with tears in his eyes. "We didn't recognize you. Please forgive us." Ethan smiled gently. "It's all right. Sometimes people take time to recognize true strength." The next morning, Ashfield had completely changed. Every newspaper carried the same headline: "Undercover Officer Destroys Gang Empire While Disguised as a Beggar." People filled the streets, clapping, cheering, and crying. For the first time in many years, they saw courage become stronger than fear. Later that day, Ethan stood quietly in front of the old house where he once lived with his parents. The house was broken and abandoned now. Dust covered the windows, and time had scarred the walls. Slowly, Ethan closed his eyes. It almost felt as if he could hear his parents' voices echoing softly from inside the home. Silent tears rolled down his face. 10 years ago, he had left this town in fear. Today, he returned with honor, not as a helpless boy, but as a hero. And on that day, the people of Ashfield finally understood something important. Sometimes, the most powerful people hide behind the most ordinary appearances.